In learning jazz improvisation, it's not what we don't know that gets us, it's what we think we know that isn't true. Today we're going to talk about 3 of those things. Chords having scales, you have to learn everything in 12 keys, and also aiming for chord tones in your solos. By overcoming these 3 myths, in my opinion, I think it's going to free you up and really help you make much more progress in your jazz improvisation studies. Now, a caveat, I'm not here to denigrate anyone else's teaching methods and trying to distill a very complex art form. We try to create rules and systems that help students. While well-meaning, these are 3 things that in my own practice, my own teaching, and my own performance, I've found to be a hindrance, and I hope by reframing some of these things, it'll help you as well. Now, to also help demonstrate these, it's not just my opinion, we're going to be using Mr. Paul Desmond, one of my favorite solos from him, the first course on Perdido from Oberlin College. Fantastic solo where he's not breaking these rules. There were never rules to begin with, so we'll be using him as an exemplar. I brought my band, the Sononauts, over to demonstrate this and some other fun concepts. Now, we are playing the Perdido a little bit slower to illustrate these concepts rather than playing the actual recording, although that would fall under fair use. I don't really want to fight copyright flags on YouTube. So we will be performing Perdido a little bit slower to illustrate these points. Now, enough with the equivocation and caveats. Let's dive into line number 1. Chords have scales. I'm going to flash a chord symbol up on the screen, and then I want you to blurt out loud, I don't care who's around, blurt out the first thought into your head. What scale matches this chord? Go. Now, many of you just shouted out E Dorian, and you're wrong. Go wait in the car. Now, some of you are thinking, oh, no, I think I know what he's doing. The answer is E harmonic minor, because no, you're wrong as well. Go wait in the car with Jared. Now, some of you are thinking, okay, he must be talking about E melodic minor. No. There is a scale I have in mind, but it's not that either. Go wait in the car. Now, some of you are thinking, E natural minor? It's the only thing left? I'm sure that's the right answer. No, you're still wrong. The answer is C major. And you're thinking, why? How? What? Well, it's obviously a trick. You had no chance of getting it right because I never gave you the context. And even if you did guess C major, I would have changed the context to make you wrong. It's an example I do with my students. The context creates a key area. A chord symbol tells you, if it's a 7 chord, 4 notes, the root, 3rd, 5th, and 7th. Chord symbols do not tell you what's in between those chord tones. And the context can very much vary what's going to sound good or how you should approach the notes in between. Because again, chords don't have scales. Chord tones are telling you 3 or 4 notes that your rhythm section's playing. The chord tones tell us a chord. It does not tell us a scale. And chords and the scales that may or may not sound good over them vary very much on context. But we need to get away from that thinking. Now, to take this example to the next level, let's listen to what Paul Desmond played over the first course of Perdido. And when we get to the E7 chord, I want you to tell me what scale is he playing. Now, for those of you counting at home, you'll notice there are all 12 tones over that E7 chord on the bridge. Does that mean he's playing the chromatic scale? No, I would be very skeptical of thinking Paul Desmond was thinking the chromatic scale or any scale. He's playing a bit of bebop language, has surround tones and passing tones. The point being, he certainly was not thinking E mixolydian if you were in the previous level of thinking of a chord has a matching scale. It really doesn't. So instead of trying to match chords with scales, we build melodic content, phrases, licks, if you will, from the masters. Think of that rather than picking a scale. Because here's another thing. If you learn phrases from the masters, it's going to have scale tones in it. It's going to have chords in it. It'll have the things in between. But rather than thinking about it as these disparate elements we have to plug into a puzzle, we're learning them in context. We're learning melodic phrases. Again, we're going to cover this in depth in upcoming videos as well. But in the meantime, if this somewhat frees your thinking, I would greatly appreciate a like. And let me know in the comments below, what is the myth that has really held you back and how did you overcome it? I'm going to actually survey this data that you let me know, and it is important. So let me know in the comments what jazz myths have driven you crazy or really held you up. Lie number 2, you don't know a piece of vocabulary or everything you learn you have to learn in 12 keys or you don't really know it. That, of course, is ridiculous. If we take one of my heroes, Charlie Parker, for instance, there's some ideas, some phrases he plays over many, many different tunes. But you'll also find there's certain language that tends to appear in certain key areas. Why? Is it because Mr. Parker was lazy? Of course not. I'm sure he could play many, many things in 12 keys, but some ideas, some phrases work really well or are idiomatic in certain keys. The pop of the palm key D, the sliding off of the biz, or the jump in the low end. There's lots of things that sound good in certain keys and fit well and feel good under the fingers, and you'll see your favorite players play some ideas in certain keys. Now, does that mean learning things in 12 keys isn't beneficial? Of course not, it is. It's a great exercise for some things if you have time. It's great ear training. But I want to get you over the idea that you don't know a lick or vocabulary unless you run it through 12 keys. I don't have that time for a lot of the language I learned. My students don't have that kind of time. And here's another great point. If we divide up the songs in the Great American Songbook, the most called tunes at your local jam session, or the tunes you love the most, they're not distributed anywhere near equally in 12 keys. As a matter of fact, if you learn a phrase in the key that Parker played it, and we're going to take a little idea, can we get mileage out of it out of other tunes without even changing the keys? Let's find out.
1, 2, 1, 2.
So that little melodic fragment, that idea, that shape, that phrase that Charlie Parker plays actually 3 times in his solo in White Christmas, the famous recording, you can hear throughout his discography, and it often appears in a couple of similar keys. And here's another thing to think about. The Great American Songbook, your favorite jazz standards, aren't divided equally among the 12 keys. There's a few keys that happen again and again and again. So when you have a phrase, a 2-5 lick, or another idea or shape that you like, put it through the most common keys, C, F, B flat, and G, concert keys, and you're going to get a lot of mileage out of it. Sure, take some things and put it in 12 keys. I do that with folk tunes for ear training with my students, but every phrase you learn, you probably, in the 21st century, don't have time to put everything you learn in 12 keys. That's okay. Line number 3, jazz improvisation is hitting chord tones in your solos or outlining chords. This was something that I originally thought when I was learning to improvise with some well-known teachers, and my solos sounded like arpeggiation exercises with a couple of notes in between. They didn't sound good. Why? Well, if you listen to our heroes, they're playing far more than just the chord tones or putting the chord tones on the beat. You've also probably heard, well, you need to learn the bebop scale because that has a cool chromatic passing tone, but it also makes sure that the chord tones land on the beat. That's not necessary. Rather than me waxing on and on about it, let's just listen to Paul Desmond, and I'm going to put an arrow where he lands on a non-chord tone on a strong beat. So, rather than viewing our job as matching scales with chords, or hitting the chord tones and arpeggiating the chords with maybe a little bit in between, let's not guess. When we look at the masters, our favorite solos, we will find they are not following those rules because they are not rules. When we look at great melodic ideas, there are scale passages, there are arpeggiations, there are leaps, there are bounds, there are chromatic lower neighbors. They're melodic phrases. And when you start to view your job as playing melodic ideas, when I say melodic, it doesn't mean singing aria-like. It just means melodic in that it is the melodic line, because we are not playing the harmony part. I mean the more in a textural definition of melodic lines. That's what we're doing. We don't have to guess what's going to sound good or follow these rules. We ingest and enjoy the vocabulary of the masters. How to apply that? Upcoming videos are going to dig very much in depth into those ideas. In the meantime, let me know again in the comments what myths have driven you crazy, and I will see you very soon. In the meantime, of course, go practice. That's not a lie or myth. You do need to go practice.